In this video I discuss my altcoin portfolio as I'm all in altcoins and my game plan after the Ethereum ETF. One of the biggest events have been taking place for the markets. So does that change things in my portfolio and am I ready for what's going to happen in the coming period? Everything in one video here for you as I'm sharing everything on my journey as a crypto investor. So the Ethereum ETF finally started trading. We've had a very substantial long period since the approval that the trading started to happen, and basically nothing really happened. We discussed this in the earlier video as well. Price didn't move that much, but the impact is substantial. And if we go back in time, the impact of the Bitcoin ETF was negative in the first month until, or actually in the first 3 weeks, until the real inflow started to happen and grayscale outflow was finishing off. And if we look at the impact of the Ethereum ETF, we can see that there is a comparable impact to the inflow and volumes if we take market caps and say, all right, so if the market cap is 1 billion, we expect this number, and if the market cap is 4 billion, we expect this number. So if we compare the number to what Bitcoin has been doing, then the market cap is approximately 25% at this stage. And the volumes were also 25% on the first days, which is a similar impact, which is great, as the interest into the Ethereum ETF was substantial to zero. And the sentiment was actually going down the hill massively, especially if you're investing into altcoins that are in the Ethereum ecosystem. But there's a larger impact, and that is due to the fact that the inflation on ETH is actually really low. If we look at the numbers that have been issued, then the amount of ETH that have been issued during this year netted around 150 to 160 million. On the first day of trading, the net inflow, which is different than the volume, was 110 million. So it's very likely to expect that, comparable to what Bitcoin has been doing, that we're going to see a very big price move happening on ETH, because there is just not much new supply coming on to the markets. As a matter of fact, the more it's being used, the more ETH will be getting out of the actual markets, and the more ETH is getting out of the markets where we are looking at a case that it becomes deflationary. And now if you look at ETH against Bitcoin, the price action isn't doing much. We are still up around 15% since the approval. The market low of this cycle was likely at the approval, as we were expecting a lot of more continuation. But there is seemingly no increase in price due to the fact that the Grayscale Trust is selling off more heavily. The Grayscale Trust is selling off and is being transitioned, but people are starting to get out because it's the first time to get out. And on the first day, around 5% of the inflow, of the outflow has been taking place. And on the second day, in the first few hours, another 500 million has been taken away. So it's very likely to expect that in the coming few weeks, this is going to be selling off heavily until we get into the equilibrium, which means that this is going to be sold on the markets. And that is why there is not going to be there's not been much taking place on the price yet. But I think if we go back towards the Bitcoin ETF, it's just a matter of time before we will. Now, when we're looking at crypto intrinsic events that have been taking place, Mt. Gox has finished its entire, or are close to finishing its withdrawals to the creditors, which means that the Mt. Gox news initially put down the markets by a mile. We went to $53,000 per Bitcoin, while in the meantime, the interest rates and the dollar were weaker. So there's a big change between markets, primarily due to Mt. Gox. And due to that fact, we saw the repayment started. It had a slight short impact on the markets, but the news did have an impact. And now there's actually more people that hodl their Bitcoin than that people that are going to be selling. So it is just a little over hyped event in terms of panic, where the Ethereum ETF is nothing has been hyped around that event, while the impact is way more heavy over a longer period of time, not only based on the fact that we have this inflow. Then during this weekend we had Trump coming to Bitcoin 2024 for a lot of things that have been taking place. One of the things that he might be going to do during the next election or when he becomes president is that he wants Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset, which is the final game for crypto and for Bitcoin. If that is going to take place, Bitcoin is there. It is going to be a boring asset, but it's becoming adult and it's a one to have in your portfolio. And when we revert this back towards my strategy, I sincerely do not care about making more US dollars. I care about making more Bitcoin. And by looking at that, I want to know more about what the macroeconomics are doing and whether my thesis and my game plan is still the right path forward. And yes, I'm all in altcoins. So I said it a few times, it's very rough to be in this period. It's very rough to see that Ethereum ETF goes live. No impact is there yet, but also not on the Ethereum ecosystem. While we're up a little bit, I must say. But I know that the impact will come. And I know that this cycle is likely going to bring the prices way higher than we all expected. There's a thesis that we are looking at diminishing returns, or that the markets are going to be providing diminishing returns. And I think that that is a foolish statement to make, because if you package all the retail interest of the markets and you set all the institutions next to it, not even governments, but institutions, then there's so much more money going to flow into this cycle. On the other hand, there's more money needed to shock the markets upwards. But if we look at ETH, for instance, we can see that 100 million inflow on a day is close to the entire issuance in a year. So if that pace continues and we get towards a quarter of interest that we've had in the first 6 months or for Bitcoin, then the Ethereum inflow in the next 6 months is going to be 3 to 5 billion, which, as we know, is way more than the actual supply of ETH in this entire year, which 3 to 5 billion is going to have a huge impact on the price action. For instance, I think that where with Bitcoin you can do a times 15 or so on the amount of money that has been flowing into it. I guess even more. The less the supply that's on the market is ready to be sold, the higher the impact. So I think you can even do a 20 to 25x at this point. That with ETH we're getting into the same sweet spot. People are not looking to sell ETH at all. People are, and I've been to ETHCC. There's more being built onto ETH than on Solana. There's a lot of institutions coming towards ETH to invest into it. So in that aspect, if we get 3 to 5 billion, you can actually just do it times 50, I would say, putting Ethereum in a new all-time high. I think a fair estimate is between $5,000 to $7,000 if that is going to come in, and we are not there yet at this point. We are not going to be at the end of the cycle then either. We're just getting started because the macroeconomic landscape is changing, and the Fed is likely going to do rate cuts this year. We've had some economic data that becomes worse and worse. We are likely facing a recession, which is suiting BlackRock, stating that we're going to have a case of global uncertainty, which also suits the thesis that Elon Musk said that the US is going to go bankrupt. Well, as a matter of fact, with these yields, they will, and the yields start to fall because the markets also see that inflation isn't, according to the data, isn't going to be as sticky as it is, but it's also impossible for the US to continue paying the debt payments with these rate levels unless they continue printing. So your best bet then is Bitcoin. And your second best bet, when the liquidity starts to increase and the recession starts to happen, is altcoins. So in that case, if we're looking at the rate cuts that a lot of countries have been doing it already. It's very likely to expect that the Fed is going to do it in September too, ending the policy that we've seen. And then we've got the Ethereum ETF that has been announced, and it's going to change the entire market. So what is my thesis going to be going forward? Well, my game plan is that I'm all in altcoins, and I said before, like, these weeks are not great to begin. I'm sure about that. I'm on a loss there. We had a relatively wrong thesis. I think that based on the fact that the yields were coming down and the dollar was coming down, but crypto intrinsic events like Mt. Gox pushed down Bitcoin. It's a delayed price action, so it's very likely that Bitcoin is gonna follow through to the levels that gold is at this point, making new all-time highs in the next few months, which means that I think that based on the fact that so much is being built within the ETH ecosystem and the Ethereum ETF being live, having such a big impact into the markets, I invest heavily into the ETH ecosystem. I believe that if your thesis is that ETH is changing and that ETH is going to outperform Bitcoin, then the ETH ecosystem is going to outperform ETH. And I am not in it. If that is the case, then your case is also that by thinking that Bitcoin is for the coming few years undervalued, that ETH is massively undervalued, and that the ETH ecosystem has been getting a unethical big correction at this point, that these valuations are quickly going to run back up the moment that the sentiment is switching on ETH, and that is just weeks away. So I'm sticking to my all-in game on altcoins. I'm mostly in smaller altcoins, which I fancy a lot when it comes to trading into the markets. I switched a lot, as you know. I switched from instance, stuff like Cosmos, and I went to things like Omni Network or the newer coins that are out there. And I'm going to make content about that. And talking about content, if you want to know more about my portfolio, my strategy, and everything that I do, click on the link beneath for our Telegram chat. Our Telegram chat is going to be giving more in-depth content, cool giveaways, and more towards the people that are dedicated to follow and join me on the journey, because we've got some really cool stuff as well. We've got new websites, new team, as at least we have been growing the team. We've got a new office, which we're going to next week, which means new video content. We're going to be making more professional content on my channel, more about me, more about my thesis, more about the strategy, just more. And we're going to make a podcast. Comment beneath if you want to know, or if you are having some ideas on what type of content you would like to see. I'm here for you, and we're going to do this journey together alongside our lovely team, alongside you guys, and alongside a way towards potential financial freedom, because that's the ultimate goal that we are chasing, because we are living in an unfair system. I'll see you again on a new video. Ciao.